All right, everybody, buckle up because we're diving deep into the 2024 election today.
Let's do it.
And to guide us on this little journey, we're taking a closer look at a recent episode of Real Talk with Lady T and Mr. Terrific.
Sounds like a plan.
They wasted no time, jumping right into the heart of the matter, They pretty much said it's Donald Trump and Kamala Harris setting the stage. Those are the two big names.
Yeah, they kind of cut to the chase, didn't they?
Exactly. It really struck me how they framed the whole election around these two, even though, let's be honest, the primaries haven't even kicked off yet.
Right. It's like they were saying, look, these are the contenders. Pay attention.
Yeah, it was like, everybody else, step aside.
Exactly.
And you know what I found fascinating? How they presented this election as a fundamental choice for America. Like, what direction do we want to go in?
Yeah, because they offer such different visions.
Totally.
Hmm.
Lady T and Mr. Terrific made it crystal clear. Trump and Harris, they're painting two very different pictures of America's future.
And the podcast really digs into those core policy areas where they clash.
It's true. You've got Trump on one side waving the America First banner high. He's all about that economic growth, tightening immigration, that sort of thing.
And on the other side, we have Harris with her own set of priorities. Healthcare reform, tackling climate change, pushing for social justice.
Yeah, those seem to be her big ticket items, at least according to Lady T and Mr. Terrific.
It's a classic clash of ideologies. And here's where it gets really interesting, especially for our listeners.
Okay, lay it on us.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Trump's vision really resonates with voters.
Okay, I'm following you.
We could see a big push for deregulation, fewer rules for businesses, potentially leading to faster economic growth.
That sounds appealing on the surface. Who doesn't like the idea of a booming economy?
Right. But, and this is a big but,
I'm sensing a however coming.
deregulation can be a bit of a loaded term. Essentially, it means rolling back some of that government oversight.
You mean like in areas like finance or environmental protection?
Exactly. Now, some people, they'll argue that it's like taking the shackles off businesses, freeing them from all that red tape so they can grow and create jobs.
Okay, I see that perspective. Less regulation, more freedom for businesses.
Right. But on the flip side, critics, they worry that it could lead to instability, more inequality, and even open the door for some corporations to engage in, shall we say, less than ethical behavior.
So it's not as simple as deregulation equals economic growth, is it?
Exactly. There are two sides to that coin, and to their credit, the podcast does a good job of presenting both.
They do. They highlight those potential upsides of Trump's economic policies, particularly for those industries that really thrive in a less regulated environment.
Right. But they don't shy away from the potential downsides either. That widening gap between the haves and have-nots, the environmental concerns, and, let's be honest, the risk of another financial crisis if things go unchecked.
And it's not just the economy in the spotlight here.
Right. There's more to unpack.
Lady T and Mr. Terrific, they went on to dissect Trump's foreign policy.
And that's where things get really interesting, globally speaking, of course.
They emphasized his America First approach, even if it ruffles a few feathers on the world stage.
Yeah, he's not one to shy away from a bit of a diplomatic dust-up.
Especially when it comes to China and NATO. Those were hot topics.
It was fascinating how they broke it down. They talked about his criticism of China's trade practices, his insistence on NATO members stepping up their defense game.
He's definitely been vocal about those issues.
And what's really interesting here is how much his foreign policy, just like his economic policies, is all about shaking things up.
He's definitely not afraid of a little disruption.
Right. He's questioning those long-standing alliances, those trade agreements that have been in place for decades, his argument. They just haven't been working in America's favor.
And that message, it seems to resonate with a good chunk of voters.
Absolutely. They see him as a strong leader, someone who's not afraid to stand up for America's interests, even if it means ruffling a few feathers along the way.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there?
There are always two sides to every coin.
Exactly. There are potential downsides to this kind of disruptive approach to foreign policy.
Of course, alienating allies, engaging in those tit-for-tat trade wars, those things can have unintended consequences. It can impact the global economy, even national security.
It's a delicate dance, diplomacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to their credit, the podcast doesn't shy away from that tension.
They definitely acknowledge that this approach could lead to a more assertive, perhaps even unpredictable America on the world stage.
Which, depending on your perspective, could be seen as a good thing or a cause for concern.
Exactly. So we've got Trump's vision, a focus on economic growth, a shakeup of the global order. What about Kamala Harris? What's her game plan?
Well, according to our podcast gurus, Lady T and Mr. Terrific, she's got her sights set on healthcare, climate change, and social justice. Those are her big three.
And they made a point of highlighting her unique position.
And it's not just about her being a potential president.
It's bigger than that. They talked about her being a representative figure, the first female, first South Asian, first African-American vice president.
A lot of thirsts.
That's a lot of glass ceilings shattered. And it really makes you wonder, how might her background, her experiences, shape her presidency if she wins?
It's a question worth pondering. Does having someone with her background in the Oval Office translate into different priorities, a different approach to governing?
It's an intriguing thought.
Take healthcare, for example. Harris has been a strong advocate for expanding access to affordable healthcare.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, have her personal experiences, maybe even witnessing healthcare disparities firsthand, fueled her passion for this issue?
It's certainly a possibility.
And then there's climate change. She's put forth these ambitious plans to reduce carbon emissions, invest in renewable energy.
Yes, she has.
And again, you wonder, does her perspective as a woman, a person of color, demographics that are often hit hardest by climate change, does that inform her sense of urgency on this issue?
So it's not just about her stance on the issues themselves, is it?
It's about navigating a divided landscape, right?
Lady T and Mr. Terrific brought up a really interesting point about the challenge she faces bridging that divide within her own party.
Definitely a tightrope walk.
She's got to find a way to appeal to that progressive wing of the Democratic Party.
The ones who are really pushing for those big systemic changes, right?
Exactly. But she also can't alienate those moderate Democrats.
Who might be a little more hesitant, shall we say, of those big government programs.
And this is where things get really interesting, especially when you bring in those hot-button issues.
Oh, you mean like abortion rights, voting rights?
Those are the big ones right now. And they're front and center this election cycle.
It's no wonder those issues evoke such strong reactions. They're deeply personal, with a wide range of viewpoints.
And how Harris navigates them? Well, it could make or break her chances, you know?
It's all about finding that balance, right?
It's a tough line to walk. On one side, you've got to energize that progressive base.
They're the ones who are really passionate about these issues.
Absolutely. But then on the other side, she can't afford to push away those moderate voters.
The ones who might see those positions as a little too extreme, a little too far-reaching.
It's about building a broad coalition, and that's never easy. And let's not forget about those independent voters.
Ah, yes, the wild cards.
Lady T and Mr. Terrific, they made a really interesting point about them. They said those undecided voters, they could be the key to winning in 2024.
It's true. They could swing the election one way or the other, so how do you win them over?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What's the secret sauce?
Well, for Trump, it seems to be about convincing those voters that he's learned from his first term, you know? Can he persuade them that he's capable of bringing the country together, or at least governing in a way that benefits everyone, not just his base?
That's a tall order, but I see what you're saying. It's about broadening his appeal. And for Harris, what's her strategy for winning over those swing voters?
I think it comes down to clarity and connection. Can she cut through all the noise, all the rhetoric, and communicate her vision in a way that resonates with everyday Americans? Can she convince them that she understands their concerns, their hopes, their dreams, and that she has a plan to address them?
It's about showing those voters that she's on their side. It all circles back to that fundamental question, doesn't it? Can either candidate paint a picture of the future that's compelling enough, hopeful enough to secure that victory?
It's a battle for hearts and minds, that's for sure.
And that brings us back to you, our listeners. As we've unpacked these key themes, the contrasting visions, the potential benefits and drawbacks, the importance of those undecided voters, one thing's crystal clear. Your vote is a part of this equation.
It's easy to feel like one vote doesn't make a difference, but in a close election, it absolutely can.
Based on what you've heard today, how might these different visions for America, these proposed policies, how might they impact your life, your job, your community, your family? Think about it. This election, it's not just about choosing a president. It's about choosing the direction we want for our country, the future we want to build. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful.
Keep those brain gears turning, folks.
We'll catch you on the next one.